Hi everyone. Thank you very much. This is a series that we're going to run at the Armadale Library. We're going to try and hold a lecture every 2 months on different issues. This is probably something not that is normal for a politician to talk about Essendon Drug Scandal, but I think it's something that's topical, and I've had a few people that have asked me questions about it, so I thought that it would be a good opportunity to start off this series by talking about the Essendon affair. I will allow some questions at the end, obviously, so it's a lot to get through, so I will try and see how we go with it, and then at the end, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. So let's begin back in 2013, the 4th of February 2013. And it was night time, and Essendon Football Club's coach James Hird, who's one of the most majestic players ever to play AFL football, was celebrating his 40th birthday at home with his wife and children. And then the phone rings. David Evans, president of the Essendon Football Club, a long-time friend, is on the line. Suddenly the relaxed and joyous atmosphere at the Hird household is replaced by annoyance and tension. As reported in Chip LeGrain's excellent book titled The Straight Dope, the inside story of sport's biggest drug scandal, Evans says down the line to his friend, "We're in a lot of trouble. The AFL believes we have taken performance-enhancing drugs. Get over here straight away." When Hird arrives at Evans' Hawthorn home, the club's CEO, Ian Robson, is already there. A few minutes later, Danny Corcoran, the club's football manager, arrives, followed by Bruce Reid, the club doctor. Evan tells those assembled that the AFL believes the Essendon players have been taking banned drugs. Hird denies the allegations and Reid is shocked. The good doctor does recall that the players were injected with a substance called AOD 9604 under his care in season 2012. But he's sure, he thinks he's sure, that it was approved by the World Anti-Doping Agency, known as WADA. Hird is adamant that AOD 9604 was approved and can't think of any other substance the players consumed, by whatever means, was banned under anti-doping rules. Evans' mobile phone rings. It's Andrew Demetrio, the chief executive of the AFL, on the line. Evans takes the call in the bedroom. LaGrange writes, "When he returns, his face is darkened. He turns to Hird, Reid and Corcoran and says, 'He's definitely saying we have taken them.'" The Essendon doping scandal is about to heat up, but let us first go back a couple of years. On the 30th of August 2010, Essendon sacked senior coach Matthew Knight and announced as his replacement James Hird, a dual premiership player, a premiership coach, Brownlow medalist, Norm Smith medalist, All-Australian and favourite son of the almighty Dons, or Bombers as they are colloquially referred to. And he is joined by another Essendon premiership player and captain, Mark Thompson, a dual premiership coach with the Geelong Cats. Thompson is to be Hird's assistant and coaching mentor. In Hird's first season as coach, Essendon had their best season since 2004. They start off the season strongly, winning 5 of their first 8 games, but then suffer a form slump, which includes a 5-match losing streak. They win 11 games for the season before losing to Carlton in the first week of the finals. Overall, a promising start for Hird's coaching regime. But what is clear to Hird and Thompson is that the players are just not strong enough. They are too easily shoved off the ball. Changes need to be made. It is hoped that Dean Robinson, known as the Weapon, appointed by the Essendon Football Club as their high-performance manager, will rectify the situation. He had previously worked with Thompson at Geelong and also had stints at the newly formed AFL Gold Coast Club and worked for a period with Manly in the NRL, that being the National Rugby League. Robinson is to report to Paul Hamilton, the General Manager of Football, and Hird, the head coach. Robinson is given broad discretion to make the players bigger and stronger. He is put in charge of all fitness and conditioning, sports science and medical staff, and given the authority to hire the people he deems necessary to make Essendon premiership contenders. On Robinson's arrival at Essendon's Windy Hill headquarters, a number of fitness and health personnel at the club quit. Robinson brings in a new physiotherapist, weight and conditioning coach and a high-performance analysis. Robinson also arranges for a fellow by the name of Stephen Dank, who had previously worked with at Manly and the Gold Coast, to be interviewed for the newly created position of Essendon sports scientist, although whether one could call Dank a sports scientist is questionable. Dan had for some time been working in the elite sports industry. His NRL experience was not restricted to his time at Manly. He also worked at St George and more recently in 2011 at Cronulla Sharks. Dan's time at Cronulla does not augur well for Essendon. Dan's stay at Cronulla in early 2011 was very brief, in fact only a matter of weeks, but in that time he gave Cronulla players injections of 2 banned peptides. He was shown the door rather quickly by Cronulla, but the horse had already bolted. In late August 2014, in stark contrast to the Essendon saga, a dozen Cronulla players pleaded guilty to doping offences and were served with 6 months suspensions. It should be noted that this is not the first time Dank had been sacked. His tenure at the Gold Coast Suns was also brief. He was hired in November 2010 and sacked in February 2011. It was while Dank was at the Gold Coast Suns that he commenced providing a peptide called CJC 1295, banned by WADA, to Dean Robinson and his wife. At the time, Robinson was also working at the Suns. It should be noted that back in 2011, it was not an offence under the WADA rules for Robinson to consume a banned substance, as he was not an athlete. The WADA code, as it stands today, though, would also catch coaches taking substances on the WADA banned list. 3 days prior to the 2011 grand final between Collingwood and Geelong, with the Cats victorious, Dank is interviewed for the Essendon sports science job by Danny Corcoran, Mark Thompson, James Hird, CEO Ian Robson and Football General Manager Paul Hamilton. They have mixed views about Dank, with Corcoran telling Hird he is not impressed by Dank and urging Hamilton to check him out. But it was seen this was not done. Due diligence was not carried out. It is difficult to reach any other conclusion, because if Dank's past was thoroughly investigated, surely he would not have been appointed by Essendon. Hird does not take the advice of his friend and confidant Danny Corcoran. After the interview, Hird invites Dank and Dean Robinson to his home to discuss what they were doing to turn the club around. According to Robinson, but denied by Hird, the Essendon coach was jumping out of his skin to get Dank. It is agreed Dank is to introduce and run a supplements program complying with the WADA code and the AFL anti-doping code. Before continuing, it should be noted that neither ASADA, which is Australian Sports Anti-Doping Agency, or the AFL make the rules that govern doping in sport. The AFL were the last major professional sport in Australia to cede that right to WADA, so that the AFL anti-doping code must be compliant with the WADA rules. But the individual sports are responsible for dealing with alleged breaches in their sport. Thus, any AFL player issued with an infraction notice from ASADA will be subjected to a hearing and determination from the AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal. But if ASADA, or for that matter WADA, do not approve of the decision or the sanction imposed by a domestic sporting tribunal, such as the AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal, they can appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, known as CAS. Essendon offered Dank a contract of employment as sports scientist commencing on the 1st of November 2011. His responsibilities include the design of a supplements protocol and recovery and the implementation of the protocol. So Dan commences work at Essendon in November 2001. Although there is disagreement over his precise job description, he is hired principally to manage the recovery of players and their nutrition, and to do an analysis of the GPS data collected from the players during training and matches. However, Dank sees things differently. Dank is not interested in the GPS part of his job description. Someone else is brought in to do that. Dank is more interested in seeing to his so-called supplements program. Throughout his football career, James Hird had been keen on dietary supplements. And also, as a result of an ongoing headaches and problems he had with sleeping, which were the consequences of a horrific on-field accident in a game against the Fremantle Dockers at Subiaco Oval in 2002, the Essendon club doctor Bruce Reid has long prescribed Hird with temazepam. But leading into Christmas 2011, Heard's script for temazepam has run out and Reid has gone away on holidays. Heard mentions his sleeping problems to Robinson, who gives him a substance. It is unclear as to what Heard was given by Robinson to inject into the fold of the stomach skin. Heard believes it was melatonin, a hormone used to help treat insomnia. But the over-the-top suntan that Heard develops would suggest that the substance is melanotan number 2, a peptide used by bodybuilders as a tanning agent. Neither substance is banned by WADA, but Bruce Reid thinks that Heard is silly for taking anything from Robinson. But Heard is not the only club official taking substances by injections or otherwise. Throughout the 2012 season, a number of club officials are taking substances provided by Dank. As LaGrange writes, throughout the 2012 season, Dank's offices serves as a one-stop shop for club officials looking for a deeper tan, a little extra pep, to lose a few kilos or lift a few more in the gym. Some of the substances administered by Dank are permitted by WADA. 2 of them are banned. There is nothing under the World Anti-Doping Code at the time preventing Essendon staff from taking performance-enhancing drugs, but it is naive and foolish for anyone working in the professional football club to dabble in a banned substance. That Essendon staff are willing to sample Dank's wares shows the trust they have in him and the intoxicating promise of what he is offering: improved health, looks and vitality with a prick of a syringe. 1 week into 2012 and Reid is back into action from his holidays, but he's not liking what he's hearing. That is, since before Christmas, the Essendon players are being injected by Dank with AOD 9604. Reid is alarmed that the players are being injected with a substance that he has not approved. One Sunday night in mid-January 2012, a meeting is held involving Heard, Thompson, Robinson, Dank, Reid and Paul Hamilton. Robinson and Dank had asked about unauthorised injection of players. Dank assures Reid and the coaches that AOD 9604 is approved by WADA and safe to give to players. A protocol is agreed to. That is, that all supplements used at Essendon must not contravene the WADA code, must not be harmful and must be approved by Reid. Further, Dr. Reid will not approve any substance until he's been provided with a summary of the medical literature on the substance and a statement from Dank that the substance does not contravene the WADA code. Reid will consider the information, then report his decision back to Heard, Robinson and Dank. Further, the supplements program will not be mandatory and each player has to sign a consent form before they could be administered with a new substance. On the 15th of January 2012, Robinson sends an email to those at the meeting which sets out the agreed protocol. Heard responds to Robinson as follows: "Sounds good, Dino. You know my thoughts on supplements. 1, it must not harm the player. 2, it must not be illegal according to WADA and AFL drug guidelines. 3, we must get player consent. As long as we stick to those guidelines and you and Steve think it will help us, then go for it. See you tomorrow, Herdy." The next day, the 16th of January 2012, the players' leadership group meet with Heard and club psychologist Jonah Oliver. One of the players in attendance, Mark McVeigh, lets fly with his concerns and wants to know more about the supplements program and the injections. The players request a meeting that will provide details of the supplements program and that it is WADA approved. The agreed protocol does not satisfy the concerns of Dr. Reid. On the 17th of January, he writes to Heard and Hamilton, the football manager, and Robinson and Dank's boss, raising his concerns about players being given subcutaneous injections including AOD 9604. He commences the letter by saying, I have fundamental problems being a club doctor at present. He then says that the last week the players were given subcutaneous injections, not by myself, and I have no idea that this was happening, and also the drug was, and also what drug was involved. He also writes, I think we are playing at the edge, and this will look extremely badly in the press for our club. I have trouble with all these drugs. What happens next, Lagrange writes, shows the dysfunction within Essendon that allows dance work to expand into something that ends careers, threatens others, engulfs a football competition, and unleashes a series of corrosive forces. As reported by Lagrange, Reid prints out 2 copies of his letter. One he keeps, the other he takes to the club. He walks into the office of Hamilton, the man in charge of the Essendon football department, and puts the letter on the desk. It is the last anyone at Essendon remembers seeing the letter until the night of Hurd's birthday more than a year later. At the meeting at President Evans' home in Hawthorn on the night of Hurd's birthday, Reid reads out the letter to those assembled. Hurd knew that Reid had written a letter over a year ago but had not read it. On the 30th of January 2012, Hurd exchanges text messages with Danny Corcoran, who is in France seeking to recover from the grief of losing his wife to cancer. Hurd texts Corcoran, "No stress, but need to organise a meeting with you, me, Reedy, Dancy and Weapon the day you get back. Reid has stopped everything, which is getting a little frustrating. Need to get your United Nations schools back into action." Corcoran responds, urging caution. You know, I read a book on world doping while away, and once lay people start injecting players, they are always issues. We must be careful here for a host of reasons. Hurd responds, understand about the injecting and don't want to push the boundaries. Just need to make sure we're doing everything we can within the rules as other clubs are a long way ahead of Reedy and us at the moment. On the 8th of February 2012, a Wednesday, the players are called into the auditorium at Windy Hill by the high-performance staff, consisting of Robinson and Dank. Reid is not there, and he does not come into the club on a Wednesday, which everyone in the football department is well aware of. The other doctor, Brendan de Morton, also is not there. Whether Hurd is there is unclear. Hurd insists he was not in attendance, but one of the players says he was there. At the meeting, Dank tells the players about the supplements involved and how they will help their training. He also assures the players that the substances are approved by WADA, although the players are made aware that what they are being asked to take is at the limits of what is permitted in sport, with Robinson saying that the supplements program will drive to the edge of the cliff but not over the cliff. Consent forms are handed out, assuring the players that nothing being administered is in breach of anti-doping rules. The players are being asked to consent to the taking of AOD 9604, thymosin, tribulus and colostrum. At the meeting or shortly after the meeting, 38 players signed the consent form. The only player to refuse the program is David Sakarakis because he dislikes needles. He later does take AOD 9604 in a cream form. The players leave the meeting thinking that Reid has approved the use of everything, which he has not. They also do not know that one form of thymosin, that is thymosin beta-4, is banned by WADA. It should be noted that in relation to AOD 9604, Dan does seek approval from WADA for its use. In a series of exchanges with WADA, Dan verbals the WADA official and tells people at Essendon that WADA has approved the use of AOD 9604. He gives the impression to people at Essendon it has been approved, waving around a document that was not read by some officials, or if read, not read carefully. Dr. Reid cannot recall if he read the document, but he is clear that he approved the use of AOD 9604 without taking steps to verify what Dank told him. But he is equally clear that neither Dank or anyone else asked him to approve the other substances that Dank injected into the Essendon players with their consent, particularly thymosin, a peptide. As events unfold, it will be thymosin, more specifically thymosin beta-4, that will prove to be the problem, not AOD 9604, which will be shown not to be a banned substance. And if you do recall, when Joe Watson was playing against West Coast Eagles here in that season, he was booed because he had admitted that he thought he had taken this substance on a TV show a few days before. And the thing about that is that the AFL officials knew that it was not banned at that time, and no one came out to defend Joe Watson. No one at Essendon did either. Meanwhile, the injection regime at Essendon, continues. Lagrange describes it as follows. Over the weeks that follow, Essendon players are injected with peptides by sports scientist Stephen Dank in his basement office at Windy Hill. There is no ceremony and not much system. Some players drop by Dank's office for their shot, others he collars in the corridor or the weights rooms and tells them to come and see him. Once inside, it is a 3-minute thing. Dank prepares a needle from one of his vials. They lift up their training jumper and he injects them into their stomach just below the surface of the skin. Most of them don't ask questions. They've been to the information session, they've signed the consent form, they've been assured by Dot Reed that Dot Reed has ticked off on everything and had in writing that all the supplements were WADA compliant. Some remember Dan talking about a substance called AOD. Others have a recollection of being given thiamycin. Most players remember being treated from bronze vials. Others remember seeing clear vials in Dank's fridge. In mid-May 2012, a meeting is held between Hurd, Dr. Reed, Bomber Thompson, which is Mark Thompson, Dank and Jonah Oliver. Dank is told to cease injections, but it seems that the players were not told to refuse injections from Dank. The injections continue. A winning streak can be euphoric for the atmosphere at a club. Conversely, a losing streak can be disastrous. After 13 rounds of the 2012 season, Essendon are 10-3 in the wins-to-loss ratio, but slumped to 11-11 with the team not only slipping out of the top 4, but out of the finals contention. And the Essendon players keep getting injuries, alarmingly a number of soft tissue injuries. CEO Ian Robson calls a review and Dean Robinson knows the blowtorch is coming his way. Near the end of the 2012 season, Danny Corcoran, who has taken over running the football department from Paul Hamilton, who has left the club. He quickly decides that Robinson has to go, with Hurd no longer able to work with him and the 2 club doctors refusing to do so. But the problem is that the club's human resource manager says they don't have lawful grounds to sack him. They can only issue a warning. Robinson is stripped of his responsibilities and is held at the club until the scandal breaks in early 2013. But as for Dank, it is discovered he had never signed a contract with the Essendon Football Club. He has shown his marching orders and will not be returning in 2013. Eventually, he will be banned for life from the AFL. Over the summer leading into the 2013 season, drug rumours about Essendon have been building. Corcoran, a former CEO of Athletics Australia, had been told by a track and field administrator that he had heard of trouble to do with Stephen Dank. A few days before being told that, a journalist had contacted him to relay a conversation the journalist had with a Melbourne taxi driver that Dank had been dropped off at the Australian Federal Police headquarters in La Trobe Street, Melbourne. Rumours about Essendon start circulating at other clubs. Then news gets out that Kyle Reimers, who had been delisted by Essendon at the end of 2012, had given a TV interview that had yet to be broadcast, which raised questions about Dank's work at Essendon. President Evans calls Andrew Demetrio and his deputy Gillan McLaughlin many times, and each call reveals a bit more information and makes Evans fearful for his beloved club. On the morning of the 4th of February 2013, Evans is waiting in the coach's office for the birthday boy to arrive. He asks Hurd if the club has a problem with drugs. Hurd thinks he is referring to illicit drugs, which all clubs worry about over the off-season. When Evans makes it clear he's referring to performance-enhancing drugs, Hurd responds, "Mate, I don't know what you're talking about, David. I believe it is all rubbish. I've never seen performance-enhancing drugs at the football club. They wouldn't be taken by our players." But Evans is not convinced, as this differs from the information forthcoming from Demetrio and McLaughlin in the many phone calls with them of late. The issue is revisited that night at Evans' home with Hurd, Robson and Reed. On the morning after the night before at Evans' home, Tuesday the 5th of February 2013, Evans, Robson and Hurd, accompanied by the club's media minder and a crisis management specialist, have a meeting with Gillan McLaughlin at AFL House. Later on in the meeting, they are joined by Brett Clothier, the AFL's integrity manager, who had interviewed Heard back in August 2011, as Heard had shown an apparent interest in peptides. It is unclear what is discussed at the meeting at the AFL House, but Heard says that he's told that the Australian Crime Commission, the ACC, is about to publish a report implicating the Essendon Club in the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And McLaughlin urges the club to invite ASADA to investigate the club. After the meeting with McLaughlin, Robson rings the ASADA chief executive, Aura Etrusca, and invites her statutory authority, that being ASADA, to investigate Essendon. ASADA has already decided to launch an investigation into Essendon, but Etrusca does not say that to Robson. Then Evans, Robson and Heard front a media conference at the AFL House, which you may remember. Heard does not want to go ahead with the media conference. While Heard believes the club has done nothing wrong, he says to the assembled media and to the world, "As leader of the football department, as the coach, I take full responsibility for what happens in our football department." 2 days later, on the 7th of February, flanked by sports administrators, including Demetrio, ASADA and the ACC, which is the Australian Crime Commission, Sports Minister Kate Lundy and Justice Minister Jason Clare hold what is dubbed Sport's Blackest Day press conference. The federal ministers tell Australians that an investigation by the ACC has revealed that athletes are exposed to criminals dealing in performance-enhancing drugs. As February rolls into March and then into the football season, pressure mounts up on Heard. Demetrio on Melbourne radio questions Heard's position as head coach of Essendon. The club rallies together and after a thrilling win from behind against Fremantle at Subiaco Oval on April the 12th, which unfortunately I remember so well, Heard declares, "I love this club and I'm not going to stand down. And when the truth comes out, I think I'll be in a very good position and so will this football club." Essendon contracts former Telstra boss Siggy Switkowski to conduct an internal investigation of the club. He delivers his report on the 6th of May, including that Essendon has run a pharmacological experimental environment and the club's governance structure is practically non-existent. 2 weeks later, Robson, the CEO, and the person ultimately responsible for the governance of the club, resigns. Through May and June, the Bombers players are interviewed by the AFL and ASADA investigators. The legality of the joint investigation is something a number of lawyers question. The powers and limitation of what ASADA, a statutory body, can and can't do are governed by the ASADA Act and regulations. There is no provision in the ASADA Act to conduct joint investigations with a sporting body, and more importantly, there is no provision in the ASADA Act to use coercive powers held by another sporting organisation to compel witnesses to answer questions in an anti-doping investigation. Thus, ASADA does not have the power to compel the Essendon players to answer questions, but the AFL, through the contract the players have signed with the club, and the AFL, does have that power, and thus ASADA is able to obtain evidence from the player interviews that they may not otherwise been able to obtain. Their interim report, well, part of that report is handed to the AFL in early August. But by the end of 2013, President Evans has decided that he must leave Essendon and he's gone. His long-term friendship with Heard is severed over continuing disagreement between the two as to whether Demetrio had tipped the club off about the ACC and ASADA investigation. And that's really quite important because under the ACC Act, there's an issue of confidentiality. Paul Little, one of Australia's richest men, replaces Evans as president of the club. Heading towards late August, the AFL wants to act against Essendon. The entire AFL Commission had read the ASADA interim report and Switkowski's report, and they are not impressed with Essendon. After a few days of negotiation between the AFL and Essendon, the AFL is ready to hand out their penalties. On the 27th of August, under AFL the AFL announces that the Essendon Football Club has breached Player Rule 1.6 for bringing the game into disrepute. As a result, Essendon is booted out of the 2013 final series, stripped of some future draft picks and fined $2 million, which is staggered over 3 years. Danny Corcoran is suspended for 4 months, but he has had enough of football in any case. Mark Thompson is fined $30,000 and Hurd is banned from coaching for a year. Also, as part of that sanction, Hurd was not to be paid any money from Essendon in the 2014 year. And the way Essendon got around that was paying him, I think, up to $1 million in December 2013. As for Dr. Reid, the AFL wants to impose a 3-month suspension. Reid will not accept this or the charges against him. 3 weeks later, the AFL abandons its case against the Essendon club doctor. Hurd spends much of 2014 doing an MBA at an elite French institution just outside Paris. But he's also busy with legal action, challenging, along with the Essendon Football Club, the legality of the ASADA joint investigation with the AFL. Around the same time, 34 current and former Essendon players are issued with show cause notices from ASADA, alleging they were administered the banned peptide thymosin beta-4. So the 34 current and former Essendon players are known as the Essendon 34, or the 34 players. The challenge in the federal court is lost, with the court upholding the legality of the ASADA's action and thus the joint investigation with the AFL. Not long after, in October, the Essendon players are issued with fresh show cause notices. Hurd, against the wishes of his club, appeals the decision to the full court or the federal court, but in a decision handed down in January 2015, the court dismisses Hurd's appeal. By then, Hurd is back in charge as head coach of Essendon. The AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal holds its hearing into the Essendon players. On the 31st of March 2015, they hand down their finding that they are not comfortably satisfied that the Essendon 34 took a banned substance during the 2012 supplements program. ASADA are not happy but decide not to appeal the decision to the Court of Arbitration of Sport, which is known as CAS or CAS. But WADA decides it will appeal. Nearing the end of the 2015 AFL season, after a long run of inept performances by Essendon, Hurd resigns as club coach. And Paul Little declares that he intends stepping down as president. In due course, he will be replaced by Lindsay Tanner, a former Labor federal minister. Meanwhile, Essendon is charged by WorkSafe Victoria with breaching the Occupational Health and Safety Act for failing to provide a safe and healthy work environment for his employees. Essendon will plead guilty as charged and end up copping a $200,000 fine for those breaches. On November the 16th, 2015, the WADA appeal begins before a 3-member panel of CAS at the Oceania office of CAS in Sydney. The court is made up of a London barrister, the Honourable Michael Baloff QC as president, and arbitrators Roman Sibiotto QC from Brussels and the Honourable James Spilgerman QC from Sydney. A number of witnesses are called by the parties to the proceedings, including 7 current and former Essendon players. The CAS Tribunal hands down its decision on the 12th of January 2016. It is not a good outcome for the 34 current and former Essendon players, being found guilty of violating the 2010 AFL Anti-Doping Code. The Tribunal's decision is comprehensive, running to 181 paragraphs. You might be happy to know that I won't be going through each paragraph here, so it's not possible in the time available to give a comprehensive commentary, but I'll do my best to present the pertinent parts of the decision. Under the WADA rules, which remember the AFL has to comply with, there are 2 forms of anti-doping rule violations. The first form, which WADA does not rely on in their appeal, is the presence of a prohibited substance in the athlete's sample, and thus, to be found guilty under this provision, a prohibited substance must be found in the athlete's blood or urine sample. The second form of violation, which WADA relies on in this appeal is the violation of the use by an athlete of a prohibitive substance or prohibitive method. It is irrelevant as to whether the use or attempted use of a prohibited substance or prohibited method was successful. It is sufficient that the prohibitive substance or prohibitive method was used or attempted to be used. And this may be established by reliable means such as admission by the athlete, witness statements, documentary evidence, or other analytical information which does not otherwise satisfy all the requirements to establish presence of prohibited substance. In other words, under this second form of anti-doping violation, one does not need to find evidence of a prohibited substance, just evidence that it was used or attempted to be used. Now this is, and as we'll find, it's all related, besides there is some scientific evidence, to circumstantial evidence. And people may say, well, you shouldn't be using circumstantial evidence to convict these players. But we use circumstantial evidence in criminal law. People are found guilty of murder as a result of circumstantial evidence. So it's not something that's radical. The burden of proving such use of by an athlete of a prohibited substance lies with WADA. The standard of proof is comfortable satisfaction, which is greater than the mere balance of probability, which is the civil level, but less than the proof beyond reasonable doubt, which is the criminal standard. The panel believes that there was a body of evidence to support their decision that the 34 players violated the anti-doping rules, including but not limited to the following. 1. Thymosin beta-4 was requested by Dank and procured on his behalf. 2. All players had blood tests before the administration of the injections commenced, and exercise recommended for peptides like thymosin beta-4, and for which no purpose other than a sinister one could be identified. 3. All players admitted to receiving injections by Dank. 4. All players signed a consent form for the injection of thymosin. 5. 6 players interviewed by SADA said that Dank had identified what he was injecting as thymosin. 6. 2 players saw the word thymosin on the vials which contained the substance in which they were injected. 7. Thymosin beta-4 is accepted to aid recovery and repair tissue, that being a banned thymosin substance, while thymosin alpha, which is not banned, is used to boost the immune system. And the tribunal is saying it wouldn't make sense to give them thymosin alpha to boost their immune system, but of course it made sense to give them thymosin beta-4 to aid recovery and repair tissue, and Dank has one of his responsibilities was the recovery of the players. 8. The players were told to keep the supplements program secretive, even keeping it secret from Dr. Reid. And that was kept secret from Dr. Reid even by players who had Dr. Reid as their personal doctor. So not just as their club doctor, who had Dr. Reid as their personal doctor. They kept the supplements program secretive in the sense of what substance was being injected. Because of course Reid did know there was a program, but did think it had stopped at one stage. Just need my bit of supplement. Argument was made by the players' representatives that although the panel was entitled to conclude that Dank may have injected some of the Essendon players with thymosin beta-4, the evidence of the use of the substance by any particular player was not established. Fair enough argument. But the panel rejected such an argument, saying that the dance regime was not designed for any particular player, but for the whole team, and would not have made sense to omit any player. Fair enough argument also. In addition to the strong body of circumstantial evidence supporting the finding that the players were injected with thymosin beta-4, there was also some scientific evidence. Excuse me. Back in 2012, the AFL became sufficiently concerned about what Essendon was doing that it sent blood specimens from at least one Essendon player, and I think it may have been 2, to Cologne in Germany, which at the time had one of only 2 laboratories in the world capable of testing for peptides. Sample A of one of the football players' samples returned a positive test result for thymosin beta-4. Generally what happens in doping situations, you have 2 samples, sample A, sample B. Sample A is tested. If that returns positive, the athlete is told, and also the authorities, the sporting authorities, and then the athlete has the discretion to be present when sample B is tested. But in any case, I'm not sure whether sample B was tested, but the tribunal did not rely on the scientific evidence in reaching their decision. They relied purely on the circumstantial evidence. But there was some scientific evidence there. Having found that the players have violated the AFL anti-doping code, the issue then turns to sanctions. In effect, anti-doping offences are ones of strict liability. That is, one does not need to show an intent to contravene the anti-doping rules. One just has to prove that one has violated the rules. However, there is a provision for some leniency if an athlete can show that he or she bears no significant fault or negligence. For example, depending on the circumstances, an athlete's spiked drink may fall under such a provision. But in the case of the Essendon players, the tribunal did not hold that such a leniency provision applied for a number of reasons, including: 1, the players all received education on anti-doping, which emphasises individual responsibility for what supplements are consumed. 2, no player appeared to have made use of the WADA hotline. 3, no player appeared to have conducted internet searches for thymosin or to have made any other inquiry as to its elements or properties. They could have quite easily done a Google search and they would have realised that thymosin beta-4 is banned under WADA code. No player asked the club doctor for advice about thymosin, although all signed a consent form for its administration. Although the consent form said thymosin, it didn't say thymosin beta-4. The panel was not persuaded by the players' argument that they assumed Dr. Reid had approved the program and that the consent form indicated the substance injected was not prohibited and that senior officials at the club, including James Hird, were aware and approved of the program. The tribunal said that the players should have made inquiries with the club doctor, not just assumed he approved of the program. The consent form, which especially identified the substance being injected, should have triggered an inquiry by the players rather than an excuse for not making such inquiries. Also, relying on the senior players for guidance when they are not medically qualified was less impressive to the tribunal than saying that we relied on the club doctor. And although certain players were young and experienced, they were not minors. The panel reiterated that players failed miserably in not disclosing as they were required to do under the AFL anti-doping code to make full disclosure of any substance which they had used. In respect of thymosin beta-4, there was no evidence that any player complied with this duty. No player tested during the 2012 season by ASADA revealed on his doping control form that he was in receipt of the injections of thymosin beta-4. The tribunal decision of guilt and resulting sanction meant that the majority of players were banned until November the 13th of this year. So all the players are banned at least to the 13th of November 2016. There's a couple that have got some more days, so they played in exhibition games, which means their suspension is a bit longer. And if you've been reading the papers, the suspension is quite severe for some. Like, I believe Dustin Fletcher was unable to go and watch his son play AFL football because he wasn't allowed to be in the presence of an AFL game. I didn't know that the sanction went that far. But to end this lecture, before I open up questions, there's some brief concluding comments I want to make. And I should start off by saying that I am a Fremantle Dockers supporter, but James Hird was my favourite player. I think one of the most majestic players to play AFL football. So I don't believe that James Hird, or more importantly any Essendon player, intended or thought they were consuming banned performance-enhancing drugs. Part of me feels sorry for the players, as no player appears sought out to consume banned performance-enhancing drugs. And also, one can appreciate the pressure on players to agree to a regime that appears to be sanctioned by a legend of the club, James Hird. Particularly for the younger players seeking to make a career out of AFL football, it would have been very difficult to butt the system and not go along with the supplements program. But, and it is a big but, in the end, each professional athlete is ultimately responsible for any substance they consume. The players just did not undertake sufficient due diligence to ensure that what was being injected into their bodies was not a banned substance under the anti-doping regime. And I bet there would be little sympathy among Olympic athletes towards the Essendon players. Many an Olympic athlete has been disqualified or lost medals because they ingested a tablet for medicinal purposes. For example, American swimmer Richard Dumont lost his gold medal at the 1972 Munich Olympics because he tested positive for a prohibited substance present in a prescription asthma medication. And my last word on this is that a supplements program involving multiple injection just isn't a good look. And that should have raised the alarm bells for all concerned at the Essendon Football Club. Thank you. Okay.